Like about him?
I liked his behavior toward me. I thought he got me, he understood me.
At the center of the Epstein files fallout, the damage is no longer abstract. It has a name, a title, and a corner office. Brad Karp, the longtime chairman of Paul, Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison, stepped down after the U.S. Department of Justice released emails showing extensive communication with Jeffrey Epstein. According to public reporting, Karp was not accused of wrongdoing, but the institutional response was immediate. For Donald Trump, this is the moment where control narratives collapse into forced choices inside institutions he cannot command. The fallout is spreading through law, markets, and reputation at a speed politics cannot slow. According to public reporting, the U.S. Department of Justice released Epstein-related material that included emails showing extensive communications between Brad Karp and Jeffrey Epstein. Reuters reported that the messages reflected both business and personal dealings, and that Karp was not accused of misconduct connected to the communications. That legal caveat did not stop the shock. In elite professional circles, reputational risk can be decisive, even when prosecutors are not moving, because clients and counterparties do not wait for a verdict to protect their own reputations. Reuters reported that Karp resigned as chairman of Paul, Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison to avoid distracting the firm, while remaining there to continue client work. The firm named Scott Barshea, head of its corporate department, as the new chairman. Reuters also reported that Karp had served as chairman since 2008 and that the firm had grown into a revenue powerhouse with annual revenue reported at more than $2.6 billion. This was not a ceremonial shuffle. It was a containment move meant to protect client confidence and reduce the firm's exposure to ongoing headlines. Donald Trump's posture around disclosures has repeatedly treated document releases as a lever of narrative control, something that can be aimed to redirect attention and impose costs on opponents. The blind spot is structural. Once a release mechanism is activated, consequences spread through systems. Trump does not command. Partner committees that fear client flight, boards that fear association risk, recruiting pipelines that cannot sell a tainted brand, and risk officers who price uncertainty instantly. According to AP, Paul Weiss said it never represented Epstein, underscoring how unforgiving the reputational environment has become. Even proximity can be punished as if it were participation. Reuters described Karp as a prominent Democratic fundraiser, which makes the dynamic even more revealing for Trump's power calculus. Trump does not need ideological allies to produce leverage. He needs institutions that fear the cost of defying him. Yet this fallout shows the opposite problem. When the Epstein record re-enters the news cycle, the cost of staying in the chair can exceed the cost of stepping down, and that is the kind of constraint Trump cannot negotiate away. The public record has started forcing resignations on its own timetable, and Trump is losing leverage with every new disclosure. The Karp resignation also exposes a second layer of the story: how Trump's pressure campaign against institutions primes them to break when a separate scandal hits. According to public reporting, Paul Weiss became a symbol in the fight over whether large law firms would resist or accommodate Trump's use of executive power. Reuters reported in March 2025 that Paul Weiss faced intense backlash after striking a deal with Trump's administration to undo an executive order that had restricted the firm's lawyers' security clearances and access to government buildings and officials, threatening business tied to federal work and the perception of being frozen out. In exchange, Reuters reported the firm said it would eliminate internal diversity policies and commit $40 million in pro bono legal work aligned with administration causes. In that earlier episode, Brad Karp defended the agreement as a move to protect clients and keep the firm operating. For Trump, that kind of negotiated retreat is a demonstration effect. It signals that even the most elite legal institutions can be pushed into concessions when their access to government buildings, security clearances, and federal contracting is placed in jeopardy. This is where the Trump ally framing can be stated safely, because it is not about ideology, it is about transactional alignment. According to public reporting, Karp engaged directly with Trump's team in a high-stakes negotiation to protect the firm's access and business. That is the definition of proximity in Trump's world: a willingness to cut a deal under pressure. But the miscalculation is that such proximity does not immunize anyone from the next wave of documents. It can actually increase the reputational cost if later disclosures suggest you were willing to bargain for survival. Now add the Epstein emails. Reuters reported that the emails made public by DOJ described extensive communications and that Karp said he regretted the interactions. AP reported that the firm said it never represented Epstein, but Karp still stepped down because the media coverage had become a distraction. Put those facts together and the institutional logic becomes brutal. Even if you survive one Trump-driven confrontation by accommodating, you may still be pulled down by a separate reputational collapse that Trump cannot control and cannot stop. Trump's blind spot is that he treats institutions as if they are unitary actors with durable loyalty. They are not. They are collections of incentives that shift under stress. A law firm can concede to Trump to protect access in one quarter and then remove its chairman in the next quarter to protect the brand from a different kind of exposure. That is not resistance in the heroic sense. It is constraint in the practical sense, and it leaves Trump with fewer reliable levers than he claims in public. Reuters described the backlash in blunt terms. Lawyers and former colleagues criticized the firm for appearing to capitulate, warning that recruitment and client trust could suffer when a firm looks politically coerced. That matters because Trump's method relies on reputational intimidation. The executive order does not have to win in court to do damage. It only has to introduce uncertainty that clients hate and partners fear. Karp's decision to negotiate was therefore framed as pragmatism, but it moved the firm into a posture of permanent justification, where every future controversy would be judged through the lens of that compromise. When you place that 2025 episode next to the 2026 Epstein email release, a pattern emerges. Trump's approach narrows every institution's margin for error. If you resist, you risk executive retaliation and loss of access. If you accommodate, you risk internal revolt and reputational collapse the moment a separate scandal attaches to your leadership. Either way, the institution chooses self-preservation, not loyalty. The fallout is no longer contained to politics, and the institutional retreat is becoming routine. The climax of this story is not a single email line. It is the collision between Trump's preferred method and a disclosure process that behaves like a machine once it starts. According to public reporting, the Department of Justice made public a cache of Epstein-related documents, including emails that showed extensive communication between Brad Karp and Epstein. Reuters reported that Karp said he regretted the interactions, that he was not accused of wrongdoing, and that he resigned as chairman of Paul Weiss to avoid distracting the firm. Trump's decision-making in crises follows a pattern. Treat the information environment as a battlefield, pick a target, and try to force the story to land where it is useful. In the Epstein Files episode, that instinct is especially dangerous because the underlying material is not a talking point. It is a documentary record. It has dates, names, and institutional signatures, and those features trigger consequences that do not require Trump's approval. A partner committee does not need a prosecutor to move if it believes client confidence is at risk. To understand why this becomes a trap for Trump, look at the sequence of constraints that public reporting already outlines. First, the release itself. AP reported that DOJ released a large cache of Epstein-related documents under a new transparency law. Reuters reported that the newly public emails showed extensive communications between Karp and Epstein. Those are the starting conditions of the machine. Second, the target institution. Paul Weiss is not a campaign committee. It is a Wall Street law firm whose business depends on trust from clients that manage risk for a living. Reuters reported that under Karp's leadership since 2008, the firm grew into a powerhouse with more than $2.6 billion in annual revenue. When that kind of institution makes a leadership move, it is signaling to markets and clients that the risk is real enough to justify disruption at the top. Third, the proximity problem. AP reported that the firm said it never represented Epstein. Reuters reported that Karp was not accused of wrongdoing, and yet Karp still resigned as chairman to avoid distracting the firm. That is the lesson Trump keeps misreading. In this environment, proximity is punishable even when no criminal allegation exists, because the cost is paid in client confidence, recruitment, and political access. This is not fairness. It is risk management. Now add Trump's own track record with the legal industry. According to public reporting, Trump used executive power to target law firms and pressure them over work tied to his opponents or investigations touching his interests. Reuters reported in March 2025 that Paul Weiss faced heavy criticism after striking a deal with Trump's administration to reverse an executive order that restricted the firm's access and threatened business. Reuters reported that the firm agreed to scrap internal diversity policies and to commit $40 million in pro bono legal work aligned with administration causes, a deal that many lawyers criticized as capitulation. This is the only safe way to describe Karp as a Trump ally: transactional proximity, not ideological membership. According to public reporting, Karp dealt directly with Trump's team in a high-stakes confrontation, and the firm's decision moved in Trump's favor. In Trump's world, that looks like a win and a sign of pliability. In an Epstein disclosure cycle, it becomes a multiplier of suspicion because it suggests that the same leadership willing to cut a deal for access is also vulnerable to reputational exposure that spreads beyond legal formalities. That multiplier is what Trump cannot control. If Trump tries to weaponize the Epstein files to attack an external enemy, the disclosure machine still produces collateral damage in places he needs. It hits major firms, major donors, major professional networks, and the legal infrastructure that every political operation depends on for defense and for offense. A president can attack the press. He cannot easily replace the ecosystem of elite legal services without paying a price in operational capacity. The miscalculation is that Trump assumes a story can be redirected by force. The public record is not that flexible. Reuters reported that Karp stepped down as pressure mounted and that he framed the resignation as a way to avoid distracting the firm. That is an institutional statement of constraint. It says the firm believes the damage will continue if the same leader remains at the center. It also says the institution believes the story will not end on Trump's timetable. AP went further on the scale of the fallout, describing the release as part of a broader wave that has produced resignations and apologies among people with ties to Epstein. That framing matters because it normalizes a grim expectation: more names, more documents, more consequences. Trump's options shrink in that environment because every aggressive move risks triggering another round of scrutiny, and every attempt at narrative control risks looking like panic. The result is a pressure stack that closes from multiple directions at once. Legal constraint. A disclosed document is a fact pattern that can be analyzed, reported, and litigated without Trump's permission. Market constraint. Clients and counterparties respond to risk signals, and a chairman's resignation is a loud one. Institutional constraint. Partner committees and boards act to protect the brand, even if it means cutting a powerful leader loose. Political constraint. Trump's prior use of executive power against law firms encourages institutions to hedge and to distance themselves, not to bind themselves tighter to him. Put together, these constraints do not merely embarrass Trump. They narrow his usable leverage. The president who sells himself as the author of outcomes is reduced to an observer of institutional self-defense. He can claim he is steering the story, but the observable outputs are coming from other actors: DOJ releases, media reporting, leadership changes, and firms repositioning to survive. This is why the Karp resignation is the climax of a different kind of documentary. It is not about what Trump says. It is about what the system does. And what the system has done, according to public reporting, is to convert Epstein documents into a forced leadership change at a top Wall Street law firm. As long as the disclosure machine keeps running, Trump's control narrative will keep collapsing into damage control. After the climax, the story tightens into consequences. Trump's remaining options are narrowed not by a single court order, but by a sequence of institutional decisions that add up to a cage. The first option is escalation. Keep pressuring firms, keep demanding loyalty, keep treating access as a favor that can be granted or revoked. But the public record suggests that this approach produces hedging, not allegiance. When firms watch a chairman resign over reputational blowback from Epstein emails, they learn a practical lesson. Proximity can become a liability faster than any political benefit can be harvested. The second option is containment. Claim the controversy is overblown, insist there is nothing there, and move on. That also fails in practice because the process does not depend on Trump's patience. Reuters reported that Karp resigned to avoid distracting the firm, a sentence that implies the distraction would have continued. AP reported that the firm said it never represented Epstein, yet the leadership change still occurred. The institutional message is clear. Even denials and legal distancing can be operationally insufficient when a public record keeps circulating. The third option is rebranding the disclosure as a weapon aimed elsewhere. That is the most dangerous option for Trump because it invites scrutiny into motive and timing without producing control over outputs. If Trump leans into the Epstein files as a tool, he increases the chance that each subsequent release is interpreted through a political lens, which drives more reporting, more internal reviews, and more leadership risk for anyone near him. Reuters' 2025 reporting on Paul Weiss described how Trump's executive order threatened firms by restricting security clearances and access to government buildings and officials. That tool works by injecting uncertainty into client relationships, and it pressures firms to choose between public resistance and private compromise. Karp's earlier negotiation with Trump can be read in that narrow transactional sense as cooperation with Trump's leverage strategy. But the Epstein emails created a different threat that Trump could not neutralize. A firm can negotiate over access. It cannot negotiate away a public record once it is released. Reuters reported that Karp was not accused of wrongdoing, and AP reported the firm said it never represented Epstein, yet the leadership change still happened. That is an institution admitting that reputational math overrides legal formalities. The destabilizing consequence for Trump is quiet and operational. Each time a high-status actor is forced to step aside, everyone else in Trump's professional orbit reprices the risk of proximity. They do not have to condemn him. They can simply limit contact, delay commitments, and avoid attaching their names to the next defense, the next deal, or the next public statement. In that environment, Trump's options narrow from dominance to triage, and the system keeps pulling away. Reuters reported that the 2025 deal drew fierce criticism from lawyers who saw it as capitulation and warned about effects on recruitment and client trust. That episode matters because it shows how quickly internal legitimacy can fracture when a firm appears politically coerced. The Epstein emails then arrive as a second udar on credibility, leaving institutions with one reliable move: remove the focal point before the damage becomes permanent. In this cycle, every attempt at control increases the incentive for the system to pull away from Trump. By the time a chairman resigns, the story has already moved beyond spin. According to Reuters, Brad Karp stepped down as chairman on the 5th of February 2026 after emails released by DOJ revealed long-standing personal and business communications with Jeffrey Epstein, and the firm moved quickly to install a successor. Reuters also reported the firm had said on February 3 that Karp regretted the interactions while emphasizing that he was not accused of wrongdoing. The point is not to debate motives. The point is to watch the constraint. Trump's approach to power is to apply pressure until institutions bend, then claim their movement as proof of dominance. But the Paul Weiss timeline shows a different outcome. In 2025, Reuters reported the firm defended a deal with Trump's White House to escape an executive order that threatened its business by restricting government access and security clearances. That episode painted Karp in a narrow transactional sense, as a Trump-aligned actor in the sense that he engaged with Trump's White House and accepted terms that advanced Trump's leverage strategy. Now the Epstein disclosures arrive and the same institutional logic turns inward. Reuters reported that Karp's chairmanship unraveled in days, even though he was not accused of wrongdoing, because the reporting itself became the risk. AP reported that DOJ released its largest batch of Epstein investigative documents so far under a new law, and that the fallout has spread beyond the United States. Trump cannot command how partner committees, clients, and regulators price reputational danger, and that is the destabilizing consequence Trump cannot reverse. If you want more fact-locked reporting that tracks how institutions constrain political power, subscribe for the next episode and turn on notifications.